Cool.
Welcome to the Radical Recovery of Self podcast. I am here, Hillary Sepulveda Brown, founder of Radical Recovery of Self 7-Step System, and I am thrilled to be joined by our homie Les. Leslie Bacon was born in Los Angeles, California, and he is a self-proclaimed student of life. Now in his mid-30s, he is ready and sharing his worldly wisdom that he has acquired, completing his first book, If I Were Your Homie. Well, he is also growing his new business titled The Homies Company and getting ready to launch his podcast this summer of 2023. Leslie graduated and received his first position in the entertainment industry, working with an A-list actor and then moving on to the California Artist Agency, CAA, where he worked with many well-known agents and has worked in this industry in story editing, developing comedy projects, stand-up comedians, writing and film. I mean, what have you not done, Leslie, right? I have just seen so much here in just discussing who you are, but mostly I just want to say welcome because you are the person that I met, which I can't wait for us to discuss that story. But welcome, welcome, welcome to the Radical Recovery of Self podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited and happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So I'm so excited to have you here with all these new projects, but especially knowing a little bit about your story and hearing your transformation. And I can't wait to tell how we met. But before we even get into that, I'd love to hear your story of transformation. I know so many people have these dreams of Hollywood and living in the industry, the entertainment industry. I am also, from California. I'm a California transplant at a young age, so from California. And I know that when we're there and we've grown up there, it's quite a different feeling than those people who see it on TV and want to go and are in it. So I'd love to hear a bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in Los Angeles, and not in the Hollywood part. So the glitz and glamour really were not that appealing to me. It was my friends who were involved in it and the TV show Entourage. I said, wait, this is a life. Let's figure this out. And then just loving stories and movies and TV shows. One of my best friends, Mike, he was an actor back then. So I would just hang around movie sets and be in development meetings for projects. And it all just seemed so cool, telling stories and having a little bit more. I always saw entertainment as somewhat of a, like corporate America meets entrepreneurship, where you're not a full entrepreneur, but you have to be a self-starter and have your own ideas to generate, but you still have a company behind you. So that was kind of my lane. And that was the original idea, ambition, big time movie producer, be able to create projects. And as life kept taking me down that road, I started to understand about a lot of other things that I thought were a lot more important, a lot of inner work, inner peace, where the material world was amazing and figuring out how to bring things to yourself, that the idea of alchemy and manifestation. That's what it was, the first thought, but then it kind of just transmuted more into personal growth and how do things work and having that conversation with people, which still kind of is with storytelling and putting things together, but it just related a lot more with personal work. I did ayahuasca. That changed everything. And from there, I had to really accept what was going on inside and let that guide my outside world, as opposed to having the success and what's going on in my outside world guide my inside world.
I love that you let your inside world guide your outside world versus the success of the outside world guide the inside world. That's so beautiful, Leslie. And would you say that I've actually never done ayahuasca, being born and partly raised on a reservation, people assume that is probably something that I have, but I actually haven't experienced that in my life. Would you say that was the transitional point for you to move, or was there something else that transitioned you into this work, this inner healing and work of yourself, or
That's
the
a very good question.
transmutation of the soul?
Yeah. It's a very good question. Really, it was, I had just turned 30, or I was about to turn 30, and so many of my goals I had accomplished for myself. And I had friends who I had become business partners with, and we had created something really cool, but it just turned out that I was no longer involved with that. And that was a big moment for me of like, wow, I really thought this was what I was going to do with my life. And before I could be sad or mad or feel a way about it not going specifically the way that I wanted to, I had to accept that the dream was complete. We did it. It didn't continue on the way I saw it, but all the goals that were set out, it was done. And I had to really look in the mirror and find out, okay, well, what do we want to do? What this is great. We've accomplished this. Don't look at this as sad, or it's supposed to last forever. Appreciate what you had when you had it, what you did. And so that changing my relationships with my social circles, friends, I was a lot more by myself, and it just kind of came, okay, well, what do we, based off how I feel, like what do we want to do? Who are we hanging out with? What is our career aspirations? What are our personal aspirations? What are we going to do? And then, as alignment works and just kind of being in flow, I was at the barber shop back when I had short hair. And a friend of mine was in there with her son for him to get his hair cut. And she had a book in her hand. So we were talking about the book she was reading, which I had read. I don't recall the name of it. So we kind of went back and forth on books and in the spiritual space and what we got from them and how it benefited us. And after several books back and forth, she said, "You've read all of them. It's time for you to do ayahuasca." I was like, what is ayahuasca? She just smiled and said, he gave me a number of a person to call, set it up. And so my same friend, Mike, who I spoke about earlier, the actor, my best friend. I called him. I said, "Hey, bro, have you heard of ayahuasca?" He's like, "Oh man, yeah, they do it in Peru." And that is whole. My first question is, how do you know about this? I've never heard about this. And so his enthusiasm about it, we both decided, all right, let's do it. And it was maybe only 2-3 weeks or so from that introduction, from that meeting, and then we went to go do it, and it's so heavy. I think my biggest takeaway from it was, one, being able to really feel love and know that the strongest energy in the universe is love, period. And then I was able to release some trauma that I experienced in my teenage years, which I did not know had such an impact on my life going forward because of how it really affected my emotions. And from experiencing ayahuasca and just feeling the love and being able to release energy or just release what felt heavy, that changed a lot because I felt so much lighter and I started to feel so much more emotion, where a lot of it was, everything was more mental thoughts. Now a lot is more feelings. I was like, wow, how as a man, I was not necessarily comfortable, but as I wasn't as familiar with my feelings like that.
I love you made so many great points in there, and I'm trying to I'm just thinking about everything that you said from the beginning of that expectation, and you just move so fluidly through life. It's just such an honor to be here with you today. And when you were talking about that expectation in the beginning of where you thought that was like going to go on forever and ever, I think that's where so many people get stuck in that. When something moves, they almost become paralyzed instead of moving forward with that action. So I love that you were able in that moment to say, well, nothing lasts forever. I expected this, it's different. How do I shift? How do I shift from my inner circle? Because relationships shift as we grow, don't they? Right. And I think so many times they put this expectation that our friendships and our relationships are going to be forever. And we don't even know we put it on there. Right. And so that you were able to shift from that. And then all the serendipitous moments obviously brought to you through alignment of being able to shift and being open. If there was one thing, if there's one thought back then, if you could take yourself back to that, Leslie, pre-ayahuasca, pre-healing, One of the things I didn't announce in the beginning is Leslie is a certified radical recovery of self coach. He graduated last week, so I'm super honored for that as well. But before all that work, was there one significant moment that you were able to shift from that expectation into who you are today, or at least along that path of who you are today?
So yeah, prior to ayahuasca, so within the entertainment world, we had the meetings with networks and all that, and that started to shift. And it was really my best friend Mike again. His childhood best friend grew up, made it to the NBA, professional athlete, and I had become friends with him as well over time. But because of my other entertainment circle, when things were going on, I was not involved because I was always on a project or always trying to do something else. So after this ended, they called me and said, like, what are you doing? And I remember it was right around my 30th birthday, and I was just about to start my pity party of one. And they're like, hey, you should come to Vegas. We're training for the NBA season. You can work out with a trainer. You you like to read. Just hang out, just kind of reset. Just come be in the mix with us. It's like, huh, all right. And it was really just that moment in different friendship circle and experiencing different friends, experiencing more uplifting friends, or a little bit more encouraged, not to speak bad about my other friends, but this is what I was experiencing. Like, wow, and it just started showing me that things were different, that it didn't have to be so tunnel vision of how I saw things.
I love that, how you said that, because I always think of that pivot, right? And because we understand reflection and consciousness, I always think of it as we are who we surround ourselves with. And we can feel the energy. And it's not saying that we surround ourselves with, from a metaphysical perspective, there isn't a bad or good, but it's whether those energies are aligned, that vibration is aligned or not, right? And when it isn't, it can put us in a bit of a funk. And so that you were able to pivot in that moment and believe in yourself enough to actually go, right? Because so many of us would be offered that invitation and find an excuse not to. That's huge, Leslie. Congratulations for making that shift.
Thank you. Because that was also just not even a normal routine. It was a different environment, different routine, different people, different ways about getting things done, different communication. And it started to unjar me out of such a rigid what I was doing. It's like, oh, this kind of a little looser. Oh, let's try this. And it just, from there, the mold was broken.
I always like to think of that
being able to let go.
Yeah, exactly. It's a letting go. And when we get so comfortable, it's almost as if we stunt our own growth, right? And we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's where our growth happens. And if you believe in yourself enough to be uncomfortable, it's and then it almost becomes like its own addiction in itself, right? You want to be uncomfortable because you're going to get to that growth spurt, right? I love that. One of the other things that you had spoken on are the books that you've read, which made me think about how we met. And so I want to know what your favorite book so far that you've read, if you have one in particular. Mine's constantly changing. But before you do, I just want to tell this story. Last year, for the listeners on here, if you're new, you don't know this, but for those of you that have been in our social media groups or followed me for a while, you probably do. Last year, I decided to move back to Panama, which I've been here on and off for 24 years. And it was in the midst of launching my Radical Recovery of Self app and coaching program. And I got on the plane. It was a red eye out of Los Angeles, which we Californians love, right? Because you ride here in the morning and you're off and going. And I couldn't get a first class ticket as they were sold out. And so I was sitting right behind there. And I thought, perfect, I can sleep the whole way there and get ready and go. And as I got on, this group of handsome brown-skinned men dressed really well came on the plane and sat down in front of me, behind me, and one seat over was empty to the left of me. And I thought, I wonder who these guys are, was my first thought. And I thought, I didn't recognize anybody, and I'm not a huge TV person, but I thought, are these TV personalities? Nobody was really tall, so I thought probably not athletes. And then I thought, I'm gonna go to sleep. and a light went on. I mean, a literal light, you guys, when I'm talking about light for you guys listening, not a light in my brain, but the light in the completely dark cabin, the light next to me went on, and I peeked one eye open, and I could see that he was reading a metaphysical book. And at the time I was in my New Thought ministry course, and I saw that he was, and I thought, wow, now if this isn't divine intervention, I don't know what the fuck is, right? I was like, he is literally reading a book that I read just last year. I mean, on a plane, you just don't see that. And I had one book with me, and he was so considerate, and he looked over and he said, oh, I'm so sorry. Is my light bothering you? And I was like, no, I'm just admiring what you're reading. And man, it's just been a great friendship since then. We started talking we definitely didn't get any sleep. We spoke the whole 7.5 hours of metaphysics, new thought. And my favorite book at the time, I had sold everything I owned and came with one suitcase, one carry-on, and yes, my sauna blanket to Panama, and my cat. And I brought one book with me, and it was Buddha's Brain by Dr. Rick Hansen. And at the time it was my favorite book. And I just thought, no, I've got to give it to Leslie. And yeah, I mean, that's really how we met, isn't it? It was a book.
It was a book. It literally, it's funny because at first I heard your cat purring down there. I said, is it? I was like, okay. And I just kept going, and I have my friends all around me laughing, joking, silly. And I was like, all right, well, let's crack this book open. And we're reading, and you looked over, and I was like, oh, you've read this. You're into stuff like this. I go, oh, please, can we talk? Please, what's going on? Who are you? How does this work? And then you saying, oh, I'm a professor of metaphysics. And my thought was, wow, they teach this in the college? My thought was always, it interests me. And I had a lot of personal questions about how things worked. And I found that I would ask people, and maybe their ego would answer, but they don't really know, but they had to give a response. And I would try it or take in what they say and come back like, hey, that information is totally invalid. And they might laugh or what, or a back and forth, but enough for me to know, hey, you might want to figure out, read from the source. The authors who are writing this, they know what they're talking about. And being able to sit there on the plane next to you and just have a moment of familiarity, and then knowing all this, like, wow, and then you explaining how things work. And it was definitely just a divine serendipitous in alignment moment.
Yeah, talk about manifestation, right?
And that's when we go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I would say that's when we first brought up human design. And because you had a couple points, you said, oh, well, based off my human design, and I kept hearing this, like, wow, what is my human design? How does this work? And then you putting me in touch with Lindsay to get my human design, and then us figuring out that we have an extremely similar human design, and that explains a lot.
Oh yeah, and Leslie said that because we're manifestors, which is like less than, I think it's 9% and 7%, depends on who you ask the population. So it's one of the rarest types of human design, and it feels kind of lonely every once in a while being out there as a manifestor, And then I sent Leslie to a dear friend of mine, Lindsay Caracate Jones, who has a great manifestation human design course, and also Matrix. You guys want to know about Lift in the Matrix, check her out. Just shameless plug for her there. And sent Leslie over there, and lo and behold, I got a text like just a few weeks later for him saying, no fucking way, you're not gonna believe it, but he is the same. And I thought, well, that makes sense. We both manifested each other on all the plane to be in the same row, no one between us. Thank goodness for that person that wasn't there, right? Because we would have talked over them the whole time.
They would have to move. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just been such a beautiful journey. And with that, what is your favorite book? Because you're writing a book right now, and I want you to tell us about it. But what is your favorite book or the book that's had even less than favorite? Because I get asked that quite a lot, and I always think that's kind of a funky question, as my favorite book changes according to what I'm learning at the time, right? What book had the most influence on you so far on this journey of transmutation?
Okay, that's a good question. And like you, it would change. At one point in my life, I read this book, this is the most impactful favorite, and then it will grow to something else. But I could really just give you my top three with a honorable mention. It's an honorable mention to The Alchemist. That
Oh, yeah.
really led me to understand about power or treasure that I have within that I might have not discovered. And then the next one is The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. Just the idea of what I call actual factuals, maybe some universal law tied into a fictional story where it's, you're reading, oh, this is a nice story, but there's truth in there. It talks about energies and there's no such thing as a coincidence. So the Celestine Prophecy. The next one I would say is Oneness by Rasha. The idea that we're all connected and talking a little bit about the soul's journey within the human body. And then finally, Science of the Mind by Ernest Holmes. And Science of the Mind by Ernest Holmes should, if I did have a favorite or most impactful, it took me a whole year to read it. I actually have it on my bookshelf right here. It's full of highlights and pages of it's just gone through the whole thing like a textbook on my own, like a school book. And this right here, it breaks down literally everything. Anything you have a question of how the mind works, how things come together, universe, and amazing. And this Ernest Holmes is, well, as you know, Hillary, but for everyone else, is a new thought leader from the 1930s. And a lot of the cool things I find with metaphysics, universal law, universal truth is that it's always been true. The same thing in 2023 was true in 1930. And it might be explained differently or described differently, but that truth is still there. And that's one of the things I got for you.
Ernest Holmes, Science of
Ernest
Mind,
Holmes.
man. Science of Mind book I've read in, so I'm 47, I'm not in my mid-30s for all you guys to know, I'm in my late 40s. And that is a book that I read in my late teens, my mid-20s, my early 30s, and twice last year. Last year, I had the ability to go through it with a group of others. And wow, what a difference it makes, right? To be hearing it back and forth. And he is definitely also one of the most impactful new thought leaders for me. I do love his teachers as well, Emily Cady and Florence Scovel Shinn, who actually predate Ernest Holmes, however, because they were women, in the 1910s and teens, they didn't receive quite as much recognition for their work as Ernest Holmes, but they schooled him and he was able to get that word out. And knowing that we're all one, it is a fabulous book. I highly recommend, if you read that you join a study group. Because there's so many things that you can reread that book so many times and you don't get the same thing out of it ever, and that's such a beautiful, thank you so much for sharing that, Leslie. And so obviously you've read quite a few books. We know you've graduated from the Radical Recovery of Self course, which I'd love for you to talk about later, but with all that you're like, okay, go ahead.
Let me slow down. No, I was just going to say that upon completing my Radical Recovery course, you mentioned the same author, Florence, and her book, something about the power of words or the magic in what you say.
She's got a lot of books, but yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just ordered
Your
that
word
one the
is
other day as I was
your word is your wand.
The word is your wand. Yes, so I'm starting to read that right now too. So.
Yeah, and the game of life. I'm known to quote the game of life often with the quote that when you give it up to the grand designer, your highest self, all of life's circumstances unfold perfectly, permanently. And that is my daily reminder for when, we try to control everything. Right? I don't know if maybe you're not a control freak like me, but, part of why I have Radical Recovery is I was trying to control the way events and people and things happen in life. And that quote for me from the Game of Life, which I believe was published in, I shouldn't even say, but I think it was 1908. It's well over 100 years old, this book now. And it's a fabulous quote, right? Because it's in that moment of thinking that you need to control something that we remember that all life circumstances are unfolding perfectly, permanently.
You're right. And not fully understanding that and just being a manifester, it's a little bit easier to kind of control because, oh, I already thought about this. This is my
Yeah.
creation that we're all experiencing. So why would I not control it? But no, that's not how it
No,
works.
because not everybody is our human design,
Exactly.
and it is something
Exactly.
that when we're manifestors, for those of you that aren't manifestors, that is a thought. And people say, "Oh my gosh, isn't that shocking that you on a plane and you not really." I
No,
mean, I've
that's
been in
yeah.
airports across the world where I've seen people from my childhood school on the reservation in the airport lounge. And my
Wow.
kids say, "Oh, mom's seat runs into someone she knows everywhere she goes." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's manifestation." Right? And I used to think that everyone just needed to practice to be able to do that. But now I understand human design and
Mhm.
realize that that's not the case. And knowing that, was there ever a moment that you decided, since you've already manifested this, that you were going to be an author?
I had a lot of resistance with being an author, where I had gotten compliments on writing, I had gotten compliments on some of my thoughts or ideas, but I don't know, maybe it was too sensitive, and I was much more comfortable playing sports or putting a business something together or a creative collaboration with someone else. But there was just so much vulnerability in writing a book. And no, I literally had to be pressured by just a few close people. And then I had already been writing so much personal journals, just what I would call spirit messages, or when I would get a lot more into meditation, or as my life was changing and I was transmuting things, I would write it so I could look at the growth and the change and see how my mind was shifting. And after I found myself having such similar conversations with different people, and so my close friends come say, "Hey, bro, like you really know about this. Like if this is a passion of yours, you should pursue this." And then finally getting out of my own way, I say, you know what? Let me see if I can put this into a book. And I wanted to just start talking about it, but for my own reasons, I don't know, self-conscious or just how I feel, I felt I need to write it first. I would feel a lot more comfortable having a body of work that I can present, stand on, and then speak and take wherever I want to. But this body of work will live forever, and that got me to
Mm.
write it.
I am a published author, and I find that one of the most challenging things I had to overcome in writing was my personal story. I love to write
Mhm.
and I love to educate, and teaching is my passion, right? Especially teaching around metaphysics and releasing codependencies and attachments. But bringing in my own story on paper was one of those big challenges for me. And I don't know about you, if that's something that you felt, or if it just was with ease that you could share your story and bring in this knowledge to the world.
No, no, it was much easier putting the knowledge down and
Mm.
sharing wisdom,
Don't I know it?
that I knew was correct. And even when you read my most recent draft, and your note was, we want to hear about you. We want to hear how you experience these things. If it's an antidote you're giving, how did you experience? How did you go through it? And that my initial thoughts were, this is not a memoir, because when I was writing, I made it a point to not put myself in there. This is not about me. This is about the work. This is information. Trust me, if you just apply this, you'll benefit. And then just realizing, it's 2023 in today's day and age. If you put a body of work together, people want to know who is the person who created the work. And so I had to really just not be sensitive, and not kind of, or accept vulnerability and just know that, hey, like, this is your work. Let's just go ahead. I know you have a lot of feelings. You might be a little sensitive about it. I never do I understand Lauren Hill's quote about I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. Um, but it just, but being able to have someone read the book, and because of a personal story or me open up and being vulnerable, for someone else to say, "Hey, I connected off of that," that helped
Mm.
me to whatever. That's enough for me. Like, okay, I'll experience my vulnerability and uncomfortableness, as long as it's a benefit, for others. Like, we all benefit from this. Okay, cool. Like, I'll go ahead and accept the uncomfortableness, trailblazing, go do it. And that's what led
It's
me to feel more
getting
comfortable
comfortable in
putting it.
that uncomfortable
Yeah,
shit
yep. You're getting
again,
comfortable,
right? That
comfortable. You
growth,
can't run
that
from it.
growth
Everywhere you
phase.
look. Hmm.
That growth phase. So, and this book that you're writing, do you have a date that it's coming out, or we're just going to stay tuned? It's called "If I Were Your Homie" by Leslie
Yeah.
Bacon.
Yes. We're
We
gonna stay
follow you
tuned.
on social media.
Yes, I have Instagram, the Homies Company, HOMIES. And then my personal page is the Homie LB. And
Perfect.
yeah, I'm gonna start pushing a lot more content through my company page. And yeah, the book, I mean, it's funny because I now understand what they say about writers and due dates. If you're putting a different project together, real estate or anything else, it's okay. Now this is the target. We're gonna, and now when
Yeah.
you're writing, it's okay, yeah, 3 weeks from now it'll be done. And you look up 2.5 weeks and you've completed 2 successful chapters. You go, we're gonna need to push it back a little bit. But I'm on myself, and I would love to have it completed in the next few months, like prior or like right around July, and then just give a few people of samples of the completed project to give a final. What do you think? And then look at the best route for publishing or how I want to release it. But prior to the
Well,
book
I'm
being
looking
ready,
for,
hmm?
sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Leslie. I'm looking forward to this, but I've just for you guys to all know, I've already read the first edition. So I know how hot it's gonna be. Prior to releasing the book, you were about to say.
I'll just say I'm going to start a podcast as well, so I can
Ooh,
just start building up engagement. In
yeah,
addition to pushing content through the Homies Company on my Instagram and other social media platforms, because I feel start building a base up, people resonating, coming together, and then starting a podcast, start talking more, and taking pieces of my book and speaking about that, as well as some other cool, exciting things I've come up with to just start building up. So then when you do get the book, you'll have already got snippets or some samples or a piece of it. So the book will be the complete work. It will coincide with the topics that are presented on the podcast. Because even though I bring up my personal stories and experiences in the book, the universal laws and the main topics in the book are underlining. You might have gone through an experience this way, they might have gone through it this way, they went through it this way, but the undertone of the lesson and the feedback you all take is similar, and that's what's in the book. You might have
oh, I
experienced it
love
this
that.
way, but the
That's the
undertone is
creative
this way.
process, isn't it? I mean, that is
Mhm.
why that quote about all of life circumstances, it's not about the perfection of the feeling, it's the perfection of what we've created within our life. And, Leslie, I gotta do it. Which was your favorite step, having done and completed all 7 steps of radical recovery? Did you have a step that was your most favorite? And how about your least favorite? Because let's get real, it is the radical recovery of the self. You guys, for
Yeah.
those of you listening, it's not the simple, easy, let's just go through it
The
one time and
radical
done.
truth. Radical truth. Radical truth
Mhm.
was my most favorite and hardest, because
Yeah,
and will combine accountability, because accountability goes with truth. But it's looking in the mirror and you being honest with yourself. It's one thing when your friend or a loved one or therapist, whoever, gives you a harsh truth that you have to, whew, maybe I knew it, maybe I didn't, but okay, let me accept that. Okay, now how are we going to work through this and your process? And it's beautiful because that is how you get through it, truth and accountability. But that is also one of the hardest things to swallow, because you have to accept I'm accountable for that. Whatever anyone
yeah.
else had a hand, like this is also the hand that I had in my own, in having me feel in a different emotional state, and accepting that and knowing true, okay, but and then not, as you accept the truth, not beating yourself up and not wanting to, well, this is your fault, let me put all the blame and all the anger on you and all my, and it's like, hey, let's give yourself a hug, take a breath, a little bit of grace. Okay, it did happen. Let's, okay, sit with it. You don't have to ignore it or tell yourself a story. No, it did. Feel it, and then just kind of keep going forward. And the same things that hurt, truth and accountability, are the same things that really set you free from all the points of radical
I love
accountability
that.
goals
Yeah, I
of mine.
mean, you literally just went through describing all 7 of them, right?
Okay.
In that, because you did talk about forgiving yourself for the
Yeah,
blame,
yes,
shame,
yeah,
and the guilt of the
yep.
responsibility. And you're already, we can see your commitment and your action that you've moved forward. So Leslie said that's why he's graduated, yo. He is the epitome of the embodiment of truth. When you were saying that, that really is the point of radical recovery of self, right? It's shifting from our victim mentality into our victor mentality. That's the whole point of not only the certification course that, you know, you can go on and be a coach for others, but also just for yourself and your own growth. Because so often we want to blame others as they've done this to me, rather than you taking the accountability of I've created this through me.
And that's to me versus through me is healing in itself, you know, and that's one of the beautiful things of radical recovery is each step, if you trust the process and just allow it to do its work, when I talked about feelings before of a conscious thought of, oh, this is working, or you can just feel kind of this like kind of gears, you feel the gears shifting and getting in motion. And, you know, I think just that journey of feeling yourself more goes right along with radical recovery and will, you know, get you into that energetic place that you're, you know, looking to be in.
Yeah, it is, right? It's that shift and just those changing out those two words, and often say it's happening for me, through me, or through me, for me. And but for 40 years, life was happening to me. And then I had to spend the last 7 understanding that life was happening through me and for me. And it's not that, you know, things always go the way where we think that they're going to go. And I think that that's oftentimes, you know, for our listeners here, is something that you need to recognize. It's the recognizing that you do not have to do something that changes you. You can just accept what is happening in the moment, understanding you created it. And sometimes that acknowledgement doesn't feel all warm and mushy. The truth is, sometimes it'll make you want to vomit, right? When you understand it's happening through you, right? And you're like, oh shit, it's me, it's not them. You know, it feels like, which hits the word radical, you know, plus the early 90s surfer term from Southern California. But really it's the radical acknowledgement that your greatest relationship is with yourself. And we've heard you today describe that.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I've accepted it, Hillary, and I stand on it, you know, and I've been able, I grew up in the material world, you know, my 19s and from teenage years and 20s, I was so hyper focused on success, so hyper focused on creating and money. That was it, money and career, not necessarily fully understanding relationships with other people, from platonic to romantic or any of that. More so was success. How do I make money? How do I build a career? Strategy. How do I see forward and vision? You know, like chess, make this move to make that pay off here, all of that. And after just like years and years of doing that in the material world, it wasn't fulfilling. You know, it wasn't fulfilling. That's one of the things I talk about in my book, where you can go after the money and success, and you can achieve that, you know, not being in alignment, being out of whack, all that, but you're gonna fuck it up. You know, that's just how
it's all on the surface, right? It's as you said before, it's letting your success or the outer world define what's going on inside you versus that relationship with self inside you is building and defining what's going on outside, which is actually truth, right? That's what we call absolute truth. It's unmoving, unchangeable, and works unequivocally for everyone, whether you decide to be aware of it or not. It works for you and through you, not to you. So yes, I love that so much, Leslie. And, you know, relationships are really defined by our relationship with ourselves. And a couple of years ago, my daughter got married, and I loved what the pastor said that married them. And he said, you know, 2 halves make a whole, but 2 wholes make a great partnership and relationship. Because when we're looking to be completed by someone else, or even our dreams and aspirations of our successes, right? It's all the same that's still coming from outside. Like you said, you may make the money, but there's a void there. You have to complete the circle of that relationship with self. In order to feel and receive everything and sustain that, because then you understand what is that importance in your life. And it's It's love
100%.
and it's the oneness.
And it's so counterintuitive because we're not taught that, especially in America. It's greed, it's money. And you do have to have some type of income to support yourself, but it's if you just go after that, now I can clearly understand when they say people who have a lot of money, wealthy, rich, whatever, and they're miserable. Before, you
Mhm.
tell anyone growing up in the hood or anyone without money, hey, let me tell you, if you get rich right now, and you're still gonna feel bad. Most people say, "Well, let me feel the bad then. Let me know how this money feels bad. We can talk about it after." But it happens. And it's still because on the flip side, you cannot have this material wealth or any of this monetary value and be so happy. And live such a great life, fulfilling. Maybe to the outside world, you might have not traveled here or have this luxury item, but you really see that does not hold energy. It's really about what you do from the inside, the choices you make, how happy and free you feel in the choices, what type of energy or emotional feeling that you get back. That's really the magic and the real monetary value, I feel like in this world.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. Having traveled to so many places that have a lot of poverty, where
Mhm,
television and commerce are not at
mhm.
the top and in front of these children. I've watched kids surf on, doors.
Wow.
I've watched them make tin cans and bunch them all together with rubber bands to play soccer, and they have a smile ear to ear because they're so happy,
It-
right? And then I've had people say to me, well, they just don't know. Well, they just don't know what.
exactly,
Right? But
exactly.
because what are they missing exactly? And this had a lot to do with my move out of the US back to Panama. And
Mhm,
it's not saying one is
mhm,
better than the other. Because really it's a life choice of where you live, but it's
mhm,
also, and I talk about as a yoga teacher as well, I like to bring in all the niyamas and yamas of yoga. And my favorite one is Santosha, which is cleanliness. And
mhm,
oftentimes we think about cleanliness just about our area and our environment, which is true, right? If we've got clutter all over our house, we've got clutter in our mind. But
yep.
also what we put in our mind through watching the shows or listening on the podcast or whatever it is, if that's just negativity going in your mind then is taking, right? It's going in, it's placing those engrams, that screenshot or that scan of whatever's happening in that moment. That is the definition of trauma. It films that
Mm,
in that moment, and any like event that comes up, you make a decision from that screenshot that informs your brain of how to react, and I think it's often misplaced that we just think trauma of the big things and we don't look at even social media. And yes, I have social media and
mhm,
I'm on it every day. But if you look through my feed, people often ask me, how do you see all these things? Because I unfollow and I follow things that are aligned
mhm,
with me. And
mhm,
it's not about not being friends with people. It's about what do I want to put in through my eyes, right? The eyes
mhm,
are the window to your soul. So if we're looking at something that is unhealthy, that is what we're feeding our soul. And I think it's remembering that we're not missing anything. And I was recently
mhm,
asked by someone, what are you missing in life?
mm.
And I instantly sounded like, I don't know, like I've never really thought of that before. And first that plants a seed. So I'm not asking any of you guys that, because the truth is you're not missing anything until you decide to tell yourself that you are,
Mhm, mhm,
right? Because you are perfect just as you are right now in this moment and have everything that you ever needed because you have created this life that you're in
mhm,
through your
mhm,
commitments, through your thoughts and your beliefs, right? So if there's something happening that we're not enjoying in our life, like that moment that you made the decision to go to Las Vegas, you can look that something is in your thought or your belief is a little off for you
mhm,
by just
mhm,
looking at the circumstances you find yourself in, and you can pivot and change your own circumstances.
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
so beautiful.
Yeah, especially as opposed to just thinking that someone's going to come save us, or going back to maybe depending on how our childhoods were, knowing that mommy or daddy is going to come pick us up and it's going to be okay. Where you realize, especially as you get older in life, that no, it's someone's going to save you. It's going to be on you. You can receive help from others, that'll be beneficial, but you have to be the catalyst who is the most involved in quote unquote saving yourself.
Oh yes, SYS baby, save yourself. Save yourself. It's so true, and in our culture, we've been taught to put everybody above us and we put ourselves last. And I think that really is, what motivated me to share radical recovery of self with the rest of the world was learning to put myself first, as a mom of 4, stepdaughter of 1, which is 5 kids, 2 grandkids, 2 marriages down the drain, all those different things. And I thought, but I kept putting myself, but I never put myself forward. I was always giving of myself. And then when I didn't, I felt so selfish that the guilt came and set in. And so it really is about, like you said earlier, letting go, releasing, but also refilling and relearning or remembering that you are worthy of the best relationship in your life with you.
Totally agree.
Wow, it's been fun. I can't believe that hour went by so quickly.
Wow, that was an hour already?
Well, it was 50 minutes
Wow,
in and out. Holy
love
crap.
it.
Well, I mean, compared to our last full long conversation,
Yeah,
7
there you go.
hours on a
Okay.
plane,
There you go.
it's a marathon podcast between Hillary and Leslie, the podcast of truth. We can do that one day. We'll just go live and just talk until our lips fall
Definitely,
out.
yeah. For real. They're
The
both
2
energy depleted.
manifestors.
Yeah, we just, all right, falling asleep, gotta
Yeah.
go. That's all we have.
It's like those 24-hour telethons, but it'd be the 24 hours of truth. We can do it. I know we can. Oh, it's been such a pleasure chatting it up with you, Leslie. I'm so excited to read I Were Your Homie by Leslie Bacon. I'll be following you at your tags here. What is it again? Give me your social media tag. Sorry about that.
So the personal page is the homie LB, and homie is HOMIE. And then the company page where we're going to start pushing a lot of content is the homies company, HOMIES.
The Homies Company.
Yes.
The Homies Company, and I'll include that in the podcast as well as on my link tree for this episode. It has been such a pleasure. I can't wait to hear your podcast and all the information and to see all the transformations of people who are listening and learning from you. Truly a pleasure as always, Leslie. So great.
Thank you,
I'm
Hillary.
honored to have had you on.
I'm honored to be on and have you as a friend. It's my pleasure.
Oh, thanks so much. Bye, you guys. You can check us out every Tuesday at Radical Recovery of Self. And Hillary Sepulveda Brown signing off.